And that's how the harm of the cult flies under the radar in the individual's lives, because they're going to be like, everything's great. I've got my church family, I've got my family, everything's hunky-dory, everything's fine. It's like, no, there's cancer there. There's cancer underneath that. You're not noticing it because the symptoms aren't massive right now. Hey folks, welcome to Joel Reads Bible. I'm Joel and I read Bible so that you don't have to. And this is one of the super special sexy recap episodes where we go over the last 10 chapters and just kind of go like, what did we miss? Did we nail home enough points? Let's nail home a few more points. And so that's what we're doing right now. And we're going to be talking about Deuteronomy. I never know how to pronounce that. 21 to 30. So let's get right into it. In chapter 21, we got the incredibly disturbing passage where God says, and this is of course God commanding this, that if you go into war with some people and you see an attractive woman that is amongst the captives, you can take her and make her your wife. I don't know if I described it as intensely as I maybe should have at the time, but this is forced marriage. Nowadays, modern people consider it a crime against humanity. Forced marriage can be thought of as slavery. Obviously, rape is going to be involved. Make no mistake, this is forced marriage. This is a man going, I think that woman's attractive. God says, well, then take her and make her your wife. No mention of consent. Go into her, sleep with her, and if you don't like her, you can kick her to the curb. She's, of course, a captive, so to imagine that she can consent is pretty naive, and probably, if you're arguing for the Bible, incredibly disingenuous, I would assume. If a woman can't consent, right, and you are choosing that she is going to be your wife, and you are choosing that you are going to sleep with her after a month, because that is when you can go into her, then that is a sexual assault. There's no two ways about that, right? If it was like, if you see a beautiful woman, you can ask her very nicely if she's interested in maybe going on a date or something like that and getting to know you. You know, it doesn't really describe it that way. It's like, just take her and then after a month you can have sex with her. So that is definitely a sexual assault. But one apologetic people might use is, well, these women were being protected, right? So this was actually a good thing. They would have died if the man hadn't taken her in. There's a lot of reasons why this is a stupid thing to say. One of the things would be, why wouldn't God make a world where a woman wouldn't have to marry the man who killed her parents, you know, in order to survive, right? Like, why couldn't he create a world where there was so much equality and all those things, women had agency and whatnot, so that this kind of thing didn't have to happen? This wasn't the best option. But putting that to one side, that's also not what's happening here, because the man is taking her, trying her out, having sex with her, and then if he didn't really like that, if he didn't really enjoy it, send her on her way, kick her to the curb. Then she can go and not survive for all he cares. So that isn't really about her best interest, right? So we can't really use that apologetic. And think about the woman in this situation, right? So this man goes, I want that one. Come over here, I want that one. And then he waits for a month, she mourns, and then he's going to go into her. And now she knows that her value is tied to her virginity. God has made that abundantly clear. That's part of his perfect system, right? She knows her value is tied to her virginity. Once she loses that, then she's sent out into the world, and is anyone else going to marry her, right? She's got to survive in some other way. It's probably going to be more desperate. So now there's a power dynamic, which I don't know if you've ever heard of power dynamics, where like she has to please this man, right? If she wants to survive in this barbaric, misogynistic, patriarchal world, she has to please the man. God has created a system where a woman is in a position of always just needing to please the man, because it seems that he hates women, right? If they don't want to be with this guy, he's going to sexually assault her. He's going to take her virginity. If she doesn't play it up like it's a great time and perform well enough for him, then she's going to be kicked to the curb, and who else is going to want her when her only value of the time has been taken? This is disgusting. If anybody came and like said this rhetoric to you, you'd puke in their face. But this is God's ultimate beautiful plan. This is his law that we read in chapter 28, that if you don't follow it, he's going to make you eat your children. This is how serious he is about this disgusting law. Can you believe that? Like, can you genuinely believe that? So in chapter 22, we get another really, really hard passage. Actually, there's a number of them. God is calling for the punishment of somebody not being a virgin when they get married. So essentially, sex crimes. God hates these sex crimes. And I don't know exactly what the motivation was for the people at the time, but these really awful, antiquated sex crimes are very hard to speak to Christians about because they're still trying to defend it somehow, and it's so strange. It's like they just can't see how absolutely brutal it is. That if somebody like uses their genitals wrong, you stone them to death. This is so bizarre. It's so absolutely like otherworldly to have somebody in 2025 just be like, yeah, well, hey, very serious stuff. Like, and it's so obviously like just the people of the time, because, you know, if it's God, he's just got such a demented lack of understanding about really anything, it seems. It's such a weirdly ancient prude, this timeless God, you know? Can we stop defending this stupid book and just like be human? Can we try that for once? Christians, please. It's just so horrific. It's horrific to look at this stuff and then try to defend. I know you have to, because like, well, this is our inerrant book. We can't say there's errors in it. Just say that like this one was a mistake that like somebody added it, a scribe added in or something like that. You know, like just create an apologetic so that we can move past this kind of like purity culture rhetoric to the nth degree, because there's people getting stoned or burned to death in the book. So in verse 26, there's just this really weird kind of wording. It says, to the lady you shall do nothing. There is in the lady no sin worth of death. For as a man rises against his neighbor and kills him, even so is this matter. It's like, why do we feel the need to explain why we're killing the man? You know what I mean? It's like, isn't it obvious? Like if somebody were to say to you, you know, and we don't have the death penalty for sexual assault, but if somebody were to be like, yeah, they sexually assaulted my sister, so I went and killed the guy. Let's just say some crazy happened. I don't condone that, but you wouldn't go like, oh, why? What did he do wrong? What was the problem with that? There would be no reason to, explain. But that's what they feel the need to do here. They're like, she was sexually assaulted, found a lady who's pledged to be married in a field, can't prove that she's being sexually assaulted or not. We're going to assume she was, and we're going to kill the man. Yeah, good enough. Like, good. That's good enough because he sexually assaulted a woman, right? No, not really. No, it's because, it's almost like he killed his neighbor. It's like he killed the man because he messed with his property. It's more like that. I can just hear the people at the time going like, why are we killing a man? We love the men. Why would we ever kill a man? You know, and they're like, well, we better explain this. We read verse 2. It says, a person born of a forbidden union shall not enter into Yahweh's assembly. Even to the 10th generation shall no one of his enter into Yahweh's assembly. So some sort of forbidden union. What could the forbidden union be? It doesn't really matter. The fact is that God is not inclusive. And I think that like to certain churches or even probably different sects of one of the Abrahamic religions probably will try to sell you on the idea of God in some way, if you cherry pick the right verses, being inclusive, or what somebody else said and wrote in some commentary. Oh no, he's very inclusive, but he's not. Like if you actually read it, he's not ever inclusive, okay? We have enough evidence that he is dividing people by race or ethnicity or religion or whatever he's dividing them by. He's dividing them, and they are not to intermingle. I bet you any money the mixed fabric thing is it's probably some sort of a metaphor for that. Because he makes laws to be metaphors, apparently. So what you need to do as a Christian or whomever is just picture God looking down at you. Because that's your God. No, I don't like those two together. No. And so that kid, gross. Get him away, and we're going to do that for 10 generations. We're going to do that for 400 years. 400 years, and you guys can come back to the assembly, but I'm sorry. He married someone that don't really care for their ethnicity, so that's your God. He's very finicky when it comes to humanity, by and large. Sometimes I like to point out, it gives us a hint once in a while in these books, who is it written to? And this is just good hermeneutics, by the way. People go, Joel, you're not a scholar. You don't know what you're talking about. I know the word hermeneutics, and this is a hermeneutic, because you're just trying to figure out who's the audience, right? Who are all these laws written to? And we talked about this back in, I think, Exodus or maybe even Leviticus. But we get another hint in verse 13. It says, you shall have a trowel among your weapons. It shall be when you relieve yourself, you shall dig with it and shall turn back and cover your excrement. Which we had a lot of fun with that verse. But this is telling me that the people that this is being written for are Hebrew soldiers. It's always going to be men, but now it's like fighting men. Who is being counted in numbers, right? It's the 20, and they mention it a few times here in Deuteronomy as well. It's the 20-year-olds to probably however old until they're elderly, 35. So it's the like 20-year-olds and up. These are the men that are being counted. They're the ones who matter. And they're the ones who I'm sure are held accountable. And this is the laws that they need to follow. And this is what they're going to do to the women. And this is what they're going to do to each other if they gore bulls. And this is how they're going to sell slaves. But it's really to those people. It's not God. God doesn't speak to the women. He's not saying, hey, ladies, these are your laws. He's saying, hey, men, this is how you subjugate women. This is how you keep everyone in line. This is how you run your society, but you run it. These are laws for you. And when you're carrying your weapons around, bring a poopy shovel because I don't like to see poopy. So it's good just to know who the audience is, It's men. In chapter 24, not much happened. So we're just going to move on to chapter 25. In chapter 25, I had this lapse, and I don't know why I had this lapse. I lost my mind for a second, and I sort of laughed about the amount of whipping that somebody would get, the amount of lashes, and how it was silly that at 40, it's bad, but before that, or more than 40 is bad, but before that, it's that's no problem. God is suggesting beating somebody for a crime. God is suggesting corporal punishment. When was the last time you saw anybody suggest corporal punishment? Now, I know that a lot of people still hit their children, which is insane, but corporal punishment to adults by adults is absolutely ludicrous. But this is the problem, is I'm reading this book and I'm losing my mind because it's so much blood and violence and all those things. God's killing everyone. So when someone gets whipped a few times, I'm like, yeah, okay, no problem, moving on. But it is actually bizarre that a God, again, we always have to put it into context that this God is timeless. He's immutable. And he thinks that hitting someone for punishment, whipping somebody, A corporal punishment is good and reasonable. And maybe it's because I was spanked, so now I'm numb to corporal punishment. I'm like, I was hit as a kid. I think it's normal. We should hit adults, but it's not. And there have been studies that show us that this is harmful. It doesn't help. It causes trauma, and it actually increases aggression. So like we have studies that show that God is wrong. Like God is way wrong. Don't do this. Right? Like this isn't, let's not hit people and think that that's going to fix a problem. That's going to correct their behavior and help them understand where they went wrong. That's not going to work, God. You should have done some scientific studies, God. Why didn't you move forward in time, checked out the studies we have, and then went back and had that inform your stupid laws, moron? Like, why on earth would we think that this is from a God? But the true harm is that Christians, because of what we were talking about earlier, where they have to defend this book, it has to be inerrant, they now have to think this is useful. They have to put themselves in the headspace of like hitting people, beating somebody, maybe torturing someone in order to punish them is good, is useful, is something that may be a viable option. And this is why they hit their kids still. These are like not things that just like live in the book entirely. These are ideologies that sink into their brains that are rotting, and they'll come out in other ways. This is why we need to like dump the book. Like we got to get away from it. Corporal punishment doesn't work. It's barbaric, and there was never a time when it was like, great, that for those people, no trauma, no increased aggression. You know, it was actually very, very good, and they really liked it. Like, what must you believe? What must you actually commit to be in this cult? Then we have this insane couple of verses, which is verse 11 and 12. When men strive against each other, and the wife of one draws near to deliver her husband out of the hand of him who strikes him, and puts out her hand and grabs him by his private parts, then you shall cut off her hand. Your eye shall have no pity. Which, have pity. She was protecting her husband. What this kind of like reads like to me, men who are paranoid that their wives just like want to touch their other penises as anytime they can. They're just like, oh, okay, you guys are fighting. Oopsies. I grabbed the, ooh. Unless they're like, the penis is the most important thing in the whole entire world. We need to stop women or anyone from ever touching a penis, because if they can rip off a penis or they damage any penis, that is the most important part of any human being anywhere, ever, at all, because that is what makes us men, and we are the ones that rule the society. And, something, insane like that. It just seems so crazy. And then you cut off her hand. Are you serious? And have no pity? I would have pity. If we were cutting off a woman's hand, I would pity her. I'd be like, oh, this sucks. But I don't know what the motivation for God would be. It really does seem like it's motivated by some sort of weird, misogynistic, toxically masculine paranoia of some kind. It's very strange. I wonder if there's apologetics on this. I wonder if there's apologists that are like, oh yeah, this is why it made sense in those times to cut off a woman's hand if she grabbed a man's penis protecting her husband. Like, what? So I was confused by verses 13 to 16. I won't read them, but it was about the hey, make sure you have the right weights in your bag and not sneaky weights, and the right measuring thing. So I guess when people would like weigh out products or like measure them, like this is the length of the sausage, people would have like tricky rulers, like one would be your normal 12-incher, but then there'd be one that's only 8 inches, but it says 12. And he's like, that's 12 inches, and they're all like, it doesn't look like 12 inches to me, but We live in a world where somebody can put goat fur on their arms and convince their father who knows them that it's their normal hair or that it's their brother's hair. So we live in a world where people aren't very observant, but so that's all that's going on there. It's just like, hey, when you're trading, don't screw people over. Don't scam them. The priests are doing enough of that, am I right? So then we get this callback to Exodus 17. And ironically, this is in verse 17 to 19. And it mentions, hey, remember back in the day, Amalek attacked you guys? The Amalekites, they attacked you guys. Moses put up his hands. You guys won. And I said, I'm going to blot them out of the whole entire world. No one will ever hear of them, except by the book that I'm writing right now. This is, of course, a foreshadowing for more death and destruction Yahweh is going to bring. But what this does for us is it gives us 3 different ways that God kills incorrectly in one chapter, kind of. I shouldn't say kills because of the hand. I'm counting the hand. But he's going to kill the Amalekites eventually for something that they didn't do, by the way, that their ancestors did. That's not them. If people that I don't even know their names, my ancestors did something, killing me would not be just. That would not be right. It just doesn't make sense. God's going to do that. That's incorrect. That's unjust. Shouldn't happen, obviously. We also get the new version of the levirate marriage laws, which, again, God killed Onan over this, and it wasn't a killable offense. Because if you don't want to do the levirate marriage thing and you don't want to give your brother's widow a child, all you have to do is say no and get slapped in the face, right? So that doesn't make any sense. And then, of course, honorable mention goes to the cheeky hand. So this is a nice chapter for showing how barbaric and insane Yahweh is. In chapter 26, nothing much happened. I was curious about this. My father was Syrian, ready to perish. This line, I was like, Syrian? What's that all about? And if you'll remember back in Genesis, we got a lot of Padam Aram. Padam Aram was mentioned a lot of times. So the Hebrews are Aramean, I guess, is what and that's Syrian. So I guess like historically in the story anyway, and like they probably are, they would know. So that's a little bit of educational information. So people can go, Joel, you're not scholarly. I'll go, check, they're Aramean. They're from Syria, Padam Aram. So in chapter 27, we get a description of stones that have been plastered somehow, and then all the laws written on them. And that's where they're going to have altars, and that's where they're going to sacrifice all these animals. Now, of course, they don't exist. I did a little bit of research, and it's just not true. I shouldn't say it's just not true. They just don't exist. There's no evidence of it. And the plaster was kind of like a limestone, I was reading. So I guess they would just maybe make it smooth with a limestone and then etch things into that. And there are stones like this. So it's not like this wasn't happening in ancient times. It was, but there just isn't any that are specific to what we're reading here. There's no evidence that the Hebrews did this, that this was something that happened. It's just a claim that the Bible's making that there's literally no evidence for. So it's just like part of a lore or part of a myth, but it never happened. Potentially, right? Because there's just like literally no evidence to show us it did happen. And then we got to chapter 28, and whew, was it ever a nightmare? What a horrific chapter. One of the worst chapters. I thought Leviticus 26 was good, was bad. Eesh. Jubiravity has been a bad book. Can I just say that? It's been a very bad book. I want to double down on this idea that This is a text for a time, and these people, like, they had superstitions that were very much time-stamped, and they don't apply to today, which is a little bit strange because of the timeless God. And of course, why would he say, oh, I'll give you these things that you're literally not interested in? Of course, that wouldn't make sense. But the stuff that he's going to give them is literally like just basic survival. That's all he's offering, is your basic survival, because you don't know how to do that on your own, right? You don't know how weather works. So unfortunately, you need to believe in a God who's going to like make this okay for you. But there are evergreen things that he could have offered that like transcend any time and place, right? So like peace. Now there's a hint at that. There's a hint at peace as far as like your enemies go, but there can also be like that peace that passes all understanding that we get from the New Testament. There can be that like inner peace amongst your family and friends and all of those things. There can also be good mental health. Why is he not talking about mental health at all? Isn't that strange? Like later on, I think we're probably going to learn that they're demons because, the people in the later books didn't really know how anything works either, right? But why wouldn't God be like, hey, look, I'll give you good mental health. You're not going to have depression or anxiety. None of those things will happen. I'm going to help you find your passion in life. This may seem a little bit naive. Well, that was a barbaric time. They were fighting to live. Yeah, that's him. That's his fault. He could have changed that and been like, that's going to be taken care of. And not only am I going to take care of the crops, I'm actually going to help you be satisfied in your life. And again, find meaning, purpose, all those things that Christians claim God gives you. He doesn't. But I'm going to do all of these evergreen, human condition, experiential things that we want, that we all want, right? And I'm going to give those things to you if you follow my laws. But instead he goes, you'll get good crops and make a lot of babies, because that's your concern right now. You live in a time where like it is very hard to survive, right? Mortality rate's very low. So it's probably very difficult to even just find water. So it's like, I am going to help you with the basics. If you do all the laws, which involve, of course, stoning women who you think are not virgins, right? Who didn't bleed on their wedding night when they were virgins. I forgot how women's bodies work. You have to do that for me. And if you do that, because I hate women, so do that because I hate them, and then I will give you good crops and a lot of good animals. But don't ask me for anything deeper than that, because my gift to you, the thing that I can supply you with, just sits at the exact same knowledge base as you. I never, ever, ever transcend that. So that's why modern people today can see that this isn't God, because we've transcended this like a million times over. We're way, way, way beyond this just barbaric nonsense. It doesn't offer anything. It's interesting to call Yahweh or God the Father or whatever, however you want to say it, a personal God. It's very strange. This leaning into a relationship that the Christians do, when like what we're seeing here is not a relationship. This is an infringement on the possibility of relationship, because it's coercive. It's straight up like there's a reward. It's not a great reward. And then there's countless threats, violent, horrific threats, a lot of fear. And if you think you can have a reasonable relationship here, that's probably why you don't see chapter 21 as a problem. because you go, oh yeah, a man can point out a captive who is afraid, who is in captivity, and force her to be his wife and sleep with her, and that can be a relationship. That can be fine. So if you look at God, and this, we can extrapolate this to the heaven and hell dichotomy, right? Because that's kind of what this is. This is their version of heaven and hell. This can't be seen as a relationship. Just like the marrying a captive can't be seen as a relationship. But if you are a Christian and you have to rationalize this, and you don't want it to be a religion, you want it to be a relationship, then we have to force relationship on this, or we have to take this and force it into the idea of a relationship, which a relationship should obviously be mutual. There's no coercion, no threats, right? It should be free. You're going, hey, do you like me? I like you. You like me? Okay, let's have a relationship. Like that's what a relationship is. It doesn't even have to be romantic. It can be friend relationship. It can be any kind of relationship. This is not that. This is violent. So say what you want about God. He exists. Maybe you think this is loving somehow. Don't try to sell me on a relationship. Because these are his chosen people. This is him showing who he is, right out of the gate. And it's not like any relationship I would ever want to be in. This isn't relational. This is authoritarian. And that's what God is. And that's what he always is. Even though he comes down and pretends to be a nice guy as Jesus and does a theatrical presentation on a cross. So in verse 20, it was really interesting because it said, Yahweh will send on you cursing, confusion, and rebuke in all that you put your hand to until you are destroyed and you perish quickly, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, oh, Yahweh's sending confusion, but I thought he wasn't the author of confusion. And then I was like, you know what, I better check other translations. And I told you guys I was going to do that. Most translations say confusion. The bulk of it is confusion. So he sends confusion. So this is a contradiction. There's no way out of it. This is like a blatant contradiction. We should write this one down. And the thing is, it's not a satisfying contradiction. You know what I mean? Because it's just like, he says he's not the author of confusion. He brought confusion on the Tower of Babel, confused their language, and he's going to bring confusion here. He does bring confusion. So he does do confusion. Like that's one of his things. What do you do? The Bible has errors. So I guess some Christian would tie themselves in knots trying to deal with it. But, just like, can we accept this by now? It's riddled with these types of contradictions, Some apologist has written like a 5-page blog about it. Just like, how can confusion not mean confusion? You're in a cult. This is cult stuff, guys. If you have to fight this hard, you're in a cult. So I was listening back, of course, when I edit these chapters. I was listening back to this one, and I was just like, I was just reading off these horrible things, and I almost didn't need to cut in and be like, hey, here's a little bit of commentary. Let me see what this means, type of thing, and then react to it. It's kind of like it does everything itself. It's like so egregious that you just need like a mustard seed's worth of humanity, and then you'll notice, holy crap, this God sucks. You know what I mean? Like just the smallest little drop of a thimble's worth of humanity, and you'll be like, this isn't good. Like we don't even need to talk about the eating your children part. Like it's so bad, right? But the nice thing is I did cut in. It's a very fun episode. Because that's what we do here at JRB. Hey, look, you got to have fun with it. If you don't laugh, you cry. And I guess there was a mention of the foreigner, and I wanted to drive home the idea that Yahweh is always the one that says to treat the foreigner badly. Like he's always the guy that is anti-foreigner. Obviously, it's the people writing it, Yahweh himself, he says love the foreigner like one of you. But he's also the one that's like, tainted meat's fine to sell to them. Make sure you charge them interest. It's always Yahweh. So we got to the cannibalism passage, and it was like, you know what? Even the most gentle and respectful, the sweetest people, they're going to eat their babies. I was like, I wonder if this ever happens. I wonder if this is something that like occurs somewhere else. And it does. Lamentations 4:10 describes people eating their children. And it's done in the same way too. It's like, these are good people. These are decent folk. But God has driven them to eat their babies. And for a moment there, I was like, is this an infringement on free will? But I don't think it is. I think it's just like pushing them and putting them in circumstances where like they have no other choice, which kind of feels like an infringement on free will. But I don't think you could make a very good argument about that. But it still is crazy that God is like, I'm going to make you eat your children if you don't do this. And then they don't do it. And then he's like, you're doing it. And then they do it. Like it's a dark book. It's a dark book. And the fact is that like, he knows it doesn't have to happen. He didn't have to eat it. He could still, here's some nuts. You know what I mean? Don't eat the kid. Here's some nut. Yeah, here's some manna. We'll do some manna. I don't know why he's giving them his nuts. Just give him some more manna. And then verse 63 was just this like disturbing verse, which was basically saying, God delights in doing good, but if you do the bad stuff, he's going to delight in doing the bad stuff. He's going to hate on you. He's seriously going to hate on you. If you keep his law, he's going to love doing the nice stuff. If you disobey the law, he's going to love doing the bad stuff. He likes it either way. Like he's just as long as he's like doing something to you, he's cool with it. But what's strange is that in Ezekiel 33:11, it says, "Say to them, as surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, I take no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but rather that they turn away from their ways and live. Turn from your evil ways. Why will you die, people of Israel?" I take no pleasure in that. Yahweh rejoiced over your good to multiply you, so Yahweh will rejoice over you to cause you to perish and to destroy you. I take no pleasure in that. He's going to rejoice over you to cause you to perish. Other translations say delight. So that's a contradiction, folks. We found another one. Can you believe it? We found another contradiction. God both delights in and takes no pleasure in the destruction of the wicked, the destruction of those who are not following his law. He still does it. He still does it either way. Like he's still doing it in Ezekiel. He's like, guys, just turn from your ways. I take no pleasure in this. But he does. According to Deuteronomy, this is how you know that different people wrote it and that they weren't on the same page about God. Whenever you have this there's so many different connections and there's so many different books with so many different authors written on 3 different continents, and it's also coherent. It's not also coherent, guys. It's not also coherent. This is what we're talking about. The God in Ezekiel is actually is a lot nicer than the God here. The God in Ezekiel also talks about forcing or telling people to kill their kids, which does seem to show up in Exodus 22, I believe. But in, I think, Jeremiah, and we'll get to this, but it says, I had never even considered that. God's like, I have never even considered that you would sacrifice children to me. I never even thought that could possibly be the case. These guys don't agree. They're all writing different things with different motivations, but you're here trying to make the book univocal, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So then we went to chapter 29, of course, and there was this weird verse that I didn't understand, and maybe I am getting it wrong, so I'm just like guessing. This is where, I got to take off my scholarly hat and put on my not knowing what's going on hat, which I rarely wear. And it's verse 6. It says, "You have not eaten bread, neither have you drunk wine or strong drink, that you may know that I am Yahweh your God." And it seems like he's saying, I've withheld things from you. Like all you really had was manna for these 40 years just to show my power again. Like I'm so big and tough and strong. And the way you know that is, the verse before, your clothes have not grown old, like they haven't worn out. Your sandals have not worn out, right? Also, you guys didn't even have bread to eat. You just ate this gross manna stuff and no strong drink, nothing like that. I made sure that happened too. Is that what it's saying? And is that like, oh, you're so powerful, you can withhold stuff from us? That's super powerful, God. Is that why like 9 to 10 million people starve to death every year? God's showing how powerful he is. Like, I don't know, withholding stuff. I honestly don't know what this verse is supposed to mean, but if that's what it's supposed to mean, yikes, God, yikes. When I was reading this chapter, it dawned on me that in Exodus 32, God says to Moses, you know what, I'm going to kill all these people and I'm going to start over with you. Moses is like, don't do it. You'll look like an idiot. And so Yahweh's like, okay, fine, I won't do it. And he just has the Levites kill like approximately 3,000 of their closest friends, right? It's just crazy. Then a little later, Yahweh does do that. Like, it was kind of like trying to stop and keep the wolves at bay. And then eventually Yahweh's like, no, I'm still doing that. Because they were scared of the Canaanites who were eating their children. By the way, their children, why would they eat their children? They had giant grapes. They were well fed. Why would some group of people who are well fed eat their children? For fun? I thought you ate your children if you couldn't find anything else to eat. I don't know if that's a contradiction, but it could just be that they're so evil they eat children, I suppose. God did eventually, maybe he always just wanted to have an excuse to kill all, if not most, of the Hebrews and just get a new generation and restart, with Moses. Except maybe Moses was the one that was supposed to do all the sex, so that like all of the babies were just mini Moseses. So in chapter 30, it seems like a response to the Babylonian exile. They're kind of describing like this will happen. All the things in chapter 28 will happen. And then I will bring you back together. So this is the unity thing. So it's the dark part, and then we're coming out into the sunrise of a new dawn where we can go back into the promised land that is Israel, And it is kind of a cool thing for a culture to create a myth like this to unify their people. If it is God, if it is truly God, then what's happened here? What's happened is these people went and destroyed a nation, right? And displaced them or genocided them. And then they didn't follow the law. And then they were displaced. They were sent out into the world as a punishment. And now they're going to come back, and Israel is going to destroy their enemy, right? Those bad sons of guns that got them out of their land and put them into exile. They're going to destroy them. And Yahweh's going to help. He's going to bring them back, and he's going to kill all of their enemies. But wait a second. Their enemies were just the pawns that Yahweh used to punish Israel. This is like the prophet in chapter 13 all over again. We have God using somebody to, in that case, tempt or test, which, by the way, is the same word in the Greek Septuagint as in the James passage that I brought up at the time, where it says God will not tempt. So it's the exact same word that they use. But in chapter 13, they're like, this guy's going to rise up. You're going to think that it's like somebody's like, hey, let's go worship other gods. It's going to be me. I'm going to be testing you or using him to tempt you away from me so that I can see which ones of you are the baddies. And then James says he'll never do that. So it's another contradiction. But he seems like an emotional human here, because he's just like, I'm so angry that I used these people to displace you. I caused it to happen, but I will be making them pay still. They they kind of did what I needed them to do, but now they will be harshly punished. Which also, how did he make them do that? Infringed on their free will? I mean, we saw that with Pharaoh, right? He infringes on his free will to pick on the Hebrews. I don't know if the Hebrews deserved it. I mean, there was that prophecy that they would be enslaved for a certain amount of time. So maybe they deserve it. I don't know. And then he drags it out so that he can punish Pharaoh for not letting them go sooner, I assume, because he wouldn't have had to kill Pharaoh's kids if he had just let them go after the frogs, probably, right? Then it would have been over. But nope, he hardens his heart so he can drag it out. And then he hardens his heart again. You'll remember in Exodus 14, so he'll go and chase them to the Red Sea so he can kill all of them. So he does this all the time. He hardens people's hearts so that he can have them destroyed. And this is what like a Calvinist will lean into this. They'll say, oh yeah, he can do what he wants. Like everyone, the Hebrews, everyone deserves annihilation, entirely death, burning in hell for eternity, of course. Even though God has orchestrated literally everything, they're still on the hook for it. And we shouldn't ask those questions of like, is this fair? Of course it is. He said it was. But any thinking person can see that like, this is not fair. This is not loving. This is not good. This is not just. This is not any of those things. This is just nonsense, guys. This is barbaric nonsense that people wrote about their God. And now we're trying to cope with this in a cult. And if you look into it, you're going to come to really gross Calvinist conclusions because those are the logical conclusions you'd have to draw. And then you have to like bite some really, really devastating, harsh, evil bullets. Whereas if you just dumped it, because there's no evidence for this anyway, okay? There's no evidence that God exists. There's no evidence for any of this. If you just dumped it, you can breathe. And go, oh, I don't have to think that like, even though God compelled somebody to do something, he might compel me to do the thing, I'm still worthy of being punished for the thing he compelled me to do. I don't have to wrestle with that. I can just dump it. So just dump it. Come on. So in verse 11, we get like a verse that I'm sure is going to come up a lot. This is one of those things that the cult has to deal with because of the New Testament. We'll deal with it some other day, that stuff. But this is verse 11. It says, "For this commandment which I command you today is not too hard for you or too distant." Talking about, the statutes and the commandments in the book, right? They're not too hard for you. They're right here. I didn't make them 100 miles away. They're right here. You know them. I just brought them to you. It's fine, right? The thing is that they don't do it, right? They fail at it in hindsight. Wouldn't we say that it is too hard for them? Kind of. Like, wouldn't you have to say that? It's like, this test is not too hard for you. You can pass this test. And then the person like does the test, but they fail. Oh, I guess it was too hard for you. Like that statement just isn't true then, right? This has to be a contradiction to the reality of the fictional story, right? Like in the narrative, they fail. In the narrative, it is too hard for them. So him saying that it's not too hard, that's not true, God. You should say, this unfortunately, I've made this a little too hard for you. Which is, you can't say that, because if you say that, like, if I made this a little too hard for you, it's basically saying, I set you up to eat your children. That's not going to work. So he has to say, it's not too hard, but he knows, because he's all knowing. It is, oh no, what have I done? I've again said a contradiction or, done this stupid contradictory nonsense because I'm not real and I don't think these things through because I'm an ancient Hebrew shepherd who hasn't quite got their head around how these things all are supposed to work. Ah, darn it. So just to close out here, I want to just reiterate that as much as this stuff isn't true, it's make-believe, it's myth, and it's in a book, And a lot of the times I know that Christians see these people and these stories as like felt cutouts. They don't see them as actual people with real humanity that actually were burned to death or ate their children or something like that. These are just like, whoa, crazy stories. And some people even just go, no, they're object lessons for us. If they're fictional object lessons, fine. But if you think someone lived this so that you would have an object lesson, that's gross. Like, I think that that's what is happening in the Torah the whole time, that all the fictional stories are just the object lessons to support the laws. But if you think they actually happen, and you think God's good, that's disgusting. But the abusive rhetoric is something that you as a Christian would need to accept, like even subconsciously. You have to do that. As a cult member, if you're committed to the cult, you have to like somehow accept this. And the pastors are going to spin it, but you are going to hear this. You're going to get this type of abusive relationship ideology stuck in your head. Like that's going to happen. And so it's going to skew your perspective of love and relationships. And it's going to harm the people around you. It's going to cause stress. It's going to cause distress in your relationships, in your families. Like you see that happen. You can feel it. It's real. And if you talk to any sort of ex-Christian, or if a Christian were to be honest with themselves for once, they would recognize this, that, oh my goodness, the way I treat these other people sometimes maybe takes on this form of authoritarianism that kind of strips all of our empathy and humanity and speaks to another person the way God sort of is speaking and engaging with the Hebrews. And by the way, this stuff isn't exclusive to the Old Testament. It's not just like only here we find this stuff, and if you just ignore that. No, it's also in the heaven and hell dichotomy, the wrath that Jesus is going to bring on the world as well. Like it's all part of the same pie. But the truth is that these things are affecting real people in their real lives, sometimes in like traumatic ways, massive traumatic ways. But a lot of the time, and maybe even more commonly, in more subtle ways over time, a dripping, drip, drip, drip of trauma, right? It's not one big event. It's a lot of stress over the years. There's a type of PTSD that you get from experiencing stuff like this in a smaller doses over and over and over again throughout a longer period of time. And that's how the harm of the cult flies under the radar in the individual's lives, because they're going to be like, everything's great. I've got my church family. I've got my family. My oldest son is rebellious, and so we're dealing with that right now. And, he's flipping out, and so, that's a little bit of an issue. But my younger son, he won't talk back, so it's good. We've got him in line, but the other one, everything's hunky dory, everything's fine. It's like, no, there's cancer there. There's cancer underneath that. You're not noticing it because the symptoms aren't massive right now, right? They're percolating under the surface. And so in come the apologists, and what do? They are promoting these behaviors. They're defending God and the Bible and the way this ideology works, the rhetoric, and they're calling it love, which is promoting these abuses, just to keep the cult afloat. That's the motivation, right? We got to keep the cult afloat. If they notice this God's evil, we're screwed, That can't be the case. I can't have wasted my life. I don't know what their motivations are, but whatever they are, it's a heartbreaking cycle. And if you listen to people, ex-Christians, or even try to pay attention to like what fellow Christians are saying about their like home lives, if they would share those things with you. If you listen to people and investigate your own life, you'll see that there's a lot of hurt there, insurmountable. Picture that existing in every home, in every life, in every family. When we're pushing back against Christianity, we point to the big obvious ones, the bigotry and the cult tactics of the more culty versions of the cult. We can point to the money that they have that they don't give to people in need, that they just perpetuate the cult. You can just speak to so many issues that the cult has. But there's this sort of like more subtle thing that's hard to describe and hard to prove in a sense, right? It's not super immediate. And in a world where like we like these immediate sound bites and just say it real quick so that I can understand it and, move on. This is one of those things that I think we know, like with the ex-Christian community, the deconstruction community, we know, we're well aware of it. It's just sometimes hard to communicate that. So I hope that this helps a little bit, because I know that I've experienced it. And I know that if you're watching this, you've probably experienced it. It's very real. We've kind of seen the impetus of it here. And we all know that it continues the same rhetoric, the same sort of authoritarian punishment stuff, calling that a relationship and calling that love. We see that throughout the whole entire book, and in the church, and in the home, and in all of our relationships, when we subscribe to this cult. So please be mindful of that. Think about it, recognize it, and dump the book and leave the cult. And subscribe, leave a comment, and like this video, and we'll see you next time. Bye.